First question, though, what should we name our podcast?
I was under the impression that it had a name, or no?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Right, Justin? We've named it. It's got a name.
Oh, you have not named it yet. So do you want me to come up with names?
Yes, name it right now. We're going to name it. Whatever you say, right here, right now.
Let's see. Hold on. I'm really going to think about it. You know what? Like, give me to the end to think about it.
Okay.
That's what we usually do. We usually wait till the end, because that's the best time, once the juices are going.
Right.
I'm a filmmaker.
I'm a scientist.
And we're two friends who've made movies together.
And launched a company together.
And we lost our money.
And our identity.
But we are finding ourselves again.
And this is our podcast.
This is it.
Welcome.
On today's episode, we have a very special guest.
TV producer, host, dancer among the stars.
And beloved father, friend, and former roommate.
Nev Schulman is with us today.
Nev was so forthcoming about his journey into the public eye, what he's learned, and what he's still learning.
We talk catfish, dancing with the stars, motorcycles, fatherhood, and more.
It's a whole hour with a great discussion.
On episode 11.
Turn it up to 11. So we got Nev on the show today. That was a good conversation, don't you think?
I do.
There were some poignant moments, and we got really, transparent with just, the journey and fatherhood, and it was, I thought it was really great.
Something that I did not bring up on the show, I've never seen Catfish. I have never seen the show. I don't know anything about it. And so I spent a lot of my time nodding my head because I didn't know who you were talking about or what you were talking about.
If someone says, oh, you got catfished, or they're catfished now, do you know what that means in today's colloquialism?
Yeah. I understand I know what it means, but I couldn't tell you. I couldn't say this is why that they called it that, or this is why it came up.
Well, I asked because now a catfish is a modern term of someone, faking a profile online.
Yeah, like impersonating somebody online.
And they, being Nev, his brother, Henry, these guys who made that documentary back in 2010, the term catfish is because of them. They made this documentary right at the beginning of the zeitgeist of this sort of thing. And the documentary was called something else for the longest time, all the way up until it was accepted into Sundance under a different title. But it was sort of a working title, and they needed a title. And a friend of theirs said you should call it Catfish, because at the end of the film, one of the subjects makes kind of a poignant metaphor about catfish. He basically was saying, when fishermen would fill their buckets with fish, they'd throw a catfish in there because it would keep the fish kind of lively, and so that sort of metaphor ends the film. And a friend was like, you should call the film Catfish, because it's this idea of just sort of someone injecting themselves, keeping you on your toes. And so they called the film Catfish, and then cut to 3 or 4 years later, it's officially in the dictionary, one of the modern definitions of the word, meaning this, someone posing as someone else online.
What a legacy.
The documentary is incredible. It is original. It's suspenseful. It got accused from so many people of being staged, because what those guys were doing was new. They were just sort of filming in real time, something that everybody does today. There always has their cameras on. They just sort of were doing that before it was a thing. So people just kept accusing them of staging scenes. Like, there's no way you got that on camera, or there's no way this person is who they are.
It's important to point out, because this is something that in this, like, this very strange time, it's like this razor edge where we were all internet and technology savvy, but we did not have smartphones, right? Because this was filmed.
Exactly.
This was filmed maybe after the iPhone 1 came out, like the original iPhone, maybe. But still, I mean, that, like...
But it was filmed on cameras.
Right,
I mean,
that's what I'm saying. I think we take that for granted, the fact that now everything is filmed because everyone has an HD 4K camera in their pocket. Now, again, not that it's the greatest quality, but this was in a time when, like, that wasn't a possibility. And so...
So Nev and I went to college together, but then we also did a lot of film work together. Like, he and his brother had a business where they would shoot a lot of, film a lot of bar mitzvahs, and I was often a hired shooter and editor for them. So I was working on a lot of projects. In fact, I was working on a bar mitzvah project while over the course of the year that this whole catfish story was happening. So I remember hearing little bits and pieces of it in real time as it was unfolding. But even back in 2005 and 2006, when we were in college, Nev's brother, Rel, who was at NYU at the time, who went on to direct Catfish with Henry Joost and now is a huge sought-after filmmaker, just directed Project Power with Jamie Foxx. Did Paranormal Activity 3 and 4 and are signed on to do the Mega Man adaptation. So Rel and Henry are now huge established directors. And back when Neve and I were in college, Rel would hang around on campus or, at our a cappella group practices with a camera. The guy always had a camera in his hand and he was always filming. So when people were sort of accusing like, oh, there's no way you would have caught all this stuff on camera over the course of this year of Catfish, I was like, you don't know Rel Schulman. He just films his life. And it is no, it was never a question for me. Obviously, I mean, I sort of witnessed it happening, but there was people I couldn't convince. They're like, no way, they're staging it. And I was like, whatever, dude. And now they've, I think it's the jury's sort of settled that it was all as it was presented to be. It's a true documentary, but it is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, people, it seems like we're treating it a bit like Blair Witch Project. Do you remember in the beginning of Blair Witch Project, the viral marketing, which was like even before that phrase was coined, there was this idea that like maybe this actually happened, right? Like that's kind of what the producers were putting out there, that this was real found footage. And obviously it wasn't. It was, but it was for its time, and the fact that it had never been done, it was great. But I think maybe it caught some of that shade. Obviously, they were like almost a decade apart, I think. But that they were sort of presenting this as being a real thing when really it was entertaining, but not real.
I mean, it didn't help where Morgan Spurlock, who was a huge documentary director at the time, did, Super Size Me. He was like, man, that's the best fake documentary I've ever seen. And you're just like, God, it's real. Like, and even Paranormal Activity, Paramount said, we will give you guys Paranormal Activity 3 if you tell us that you staged that. Like, we want to give you Paranormal Activity 3, but you got to admit that you staged that whole movie. And they're like, we didn't. Like, here's all the footage that you can see. Like, this is like, we'll prove it. And they gave him the job anyway, but they stuck by their guns because it's real. And the show, similarly, Neve talks about how, he really wanted to maintain that sense of authenticity in the TV show. The show's on MTV. I watched the first season. I didn't keep going on because, it's sort of an episodic, and there was some great episodes in the first season. But the documentary is incredible. I mean, I think it made AFI's top 50 of all time, sort of required viewing sort of documentaries. So it's definitely a document of its time, and it's an incredible film. Speaking of films, I wanted to shout out a film. This was too big to put in a 2 picks for next episode. It just came out. It's a documentary called Parallel Love, the story of a band called Luxury. Luxury is an underground indie kind of punk rock band from the 90s. They became my favorite band when I discovered them in 2000. And their story's incredible. They were young guys. They got in this horrific car wreck. They almost died. They kept making records. They never quite broke through to stardom or any sort of sustainable living. And they basically all became Orthodox priests. They didn't all. There's 5 of them. 3 of them became Orthodox priests, and now they're men in their 50s. 3 of them are full-time priests with parishes throughout the Southeast, but they still rock. They still get together. They still make music. They still record records. And a documentary was made a few years ago about them. And as a fan, I contributed to the Kickstarter. And then because I was so close and became friends with the band, I became sort of a co-producer on the project. And I even did some, I did a passive editing on the rough draft of the edit. I gave them notes. And these guys have just become friends and mentors of mine and allies. And, when they were practicing for a gig, they needed a central location to all come because they're all spread out over the Southeast. So they came to my office and up in my attic. And one of the thrills was just me being able to do sub in for Lee on lead vocals as they were practicing. So that was awesome. So the film that they made, Parallel Love, had a really amazing theatrical run last year. And it is now out on all digital platforms. You can rent it or buy it on iTunes, Amazon, Google, Vudu. And we are going to feature the music of Luxury here right now in this episode. So the music that you're going to hear throughout this episode will be Luxury. And I really want everyone to sort of seek out this really awesome documentary. NPR praised it. Pace Magazine praised it. Film Threat praised it. It's a great film about a really compelling band, and but it's about larger themes of just sort of what is art, what is it, these guys who had a dream, who didn't make it, who kind of pursued a different path of life, but are still able to get together and make their art. It's just a really rich film, and I wanted to give it some time here on our show. Parallel Love, the story of a band called Luxury. Coming up right now, our conversation with Nev Schulman. I'll give you a little intro for the sake of our audience.
Please don't. Just say Nev from TV.
Television, Nev Schulman.
Ladies and gentlemen, Nev from TV.
Hey, guys.
Hold on. Nev Schulman is a producer and host of multiple TV and web series. Known best for a show on MTV Catfish. He was the subject of the documentary of the same name, directed by Ariel Schulman and Henry Joost, which premiered at Sundance 2010. I've known him since we were singing a cappella together as college freshmen.
There we go. Now, this is the only stuff that matters. I can't believe you left out the only thing that actually even probably matters to me anymore, which is that I was runner-up on Dancing with the Stars.
Oh my gosh. Well, I actually had that line. Nev is also a frequent speaker, author, and activist, and advocate, and runner-up on Dancing with the Stars. So I'd like to go back. Take me back to Catfish at Sundance 2010. What was the road for that film to land there? Not the journey of the movie itself.
Oh, man.
Not that people can go watch the movie, but once you, Rel and Henry, had the footage making the film, what was the role to Sundance? Because that was a big benchmark for you, for Rel and Henry, for the film, and for the beginning of what's become your career.
Yeah.
What was the road to Sundance 2010 for that film?
I think most sort of distilled version of the story is Rel and Henry knew at some point that they had sort of stumbled onto this potentially interesting story. They didn't know what it was going to be, how long it was going to be. They had no vision going into it. It was never an intended project. It was just sort of this thing that happened, and they realized, oh, wait, this could be cool. There was actually, after we filmed what would become the majority of the documentary of us going to Michigan and meeting these people and this woman, that actually, for Rel and Henry, was almost only like the halfway point. They then came back to New York and spent 6 months filming and interviewing all the other people who had been involved in the story from the New York side. Like, my mom and themselves. And we even flew the real girl from the pictures and her husband to New York, who had also been a character. Like, they had thought that they were just sort of starting to make the doc. And after trying to sort of incorporate all these interviews, realized that it wasn't working, and that the best way to tell the story was just sort of as it happened in real time, with essentially no talking head, sort of traditional documentary interviews, and to just use the emails and Google Maps. But during that time, one of the more important sort of avalanche moments was they had put together a rough cut of the film. We'd submitted it to Sundance, but my parents were friendly with a couple who they had gone on a vacation with, and they had brought another couple, and that couple was Andrew and Nancy Jarecki. And Andrew Jarecki, who has done many things as a businessman, had not too long ago back then made a documentary called Capturing the Friedmans with his partner Mark Smerling. And so my mom, had sort of, had their info, and I don't remember whose idea it was, but it somehow became clear that like, oh, we should send them a copy of this cut and see if Andrew wants to maybe get involved or help out. And so they sent him a copy, a DVD, to his apartment in New York. And again, this is, I'm probably giving too many details, but I'll explain all of this afterwards. His wife, Nancy, actually saw it, opened it, and watched it. And thank God she did, because she then said to her husband, Andrew, like, hey, this DVD that's been sitting on the table for the last 3 weeks, like, I watched it. You should watch this. And so he did, and he and Mark reached out. And would it have been accepted to Sundance without Mark and Andrew becoming executive producers and helping really mold the sort of drafts and getting it to the final? Perhaps. Would it have been as good? Who knows? But identifying them as storytellers who I think Rel and Henry really admired, and having them go full out crazy, like intense, EP sort of hands-on to make the film what it was, I think was sort of the deal breaker that really kind of pushed it over the line. And then going into Sundance with them, because this was the first project they had done since Capturing the Friedmans, and, getting press, and, it all kind of helped elevate the exposure of the film, which in turn obviously then helped them sell it and generate buzz. And Mark Smerling's one of the most like wildly hands-on, creative, hardworking people ever. And Andrew Jarecki similarly is that way too, but he's more of like a ball-busting businessman deal maker. Anyway, so we were in good hands. But I think what started that thought process was like a lot of luck. Like the fact that my parents had gone on a trip with the Jareckis and that we could send them the copy of the film, like that's not something you can hustle for. Sometimes you just have to get lucky.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to say that in a discouraging way, like, oh, well, if you can't get lucky, you can't be successful. I'm just saying like that was for sure a major stroke of luck, in addition to the whole project being kind of lucky that helped us, get it there.
But the luck, as luck does, I think it coincided with the hustle you guys had put already in making a good product. Like if Nancy didn't like it or it wasn't good enough,
right,
you would have still had the luck to have someone watch it, but then they would have been like,
that's
move
true.
on.
That's true. Right. And I don't take any credit for the crafting of the film.
You were the subject of it. I mean,
I was the subject. I never thought it was going to become anything, or I certainly didn't project or what that it could become something so large. It wasn't even a project that Rel and Henry were primarily focused on, again, until later on when it became clear that like, oh, it's going to Sundance. Oh wow, this is like our main gig now.
Oh wow.
Anyway, so yeah, I
was it the acceptance into Sundance that sort of made the shift for you all? Like, oh wait, this is now a thing, or was it Jarecki's signing on? Or maybe neither. No, for me, it was, I mean, look, for them, I'm sure there were moments that I don't know about where they got excited. But for me, it was very different. I didn't even really, I wasn't a filmmaker. Yeah.
Nor did I ever aspire to be one or in one. I was around filmmakers. I was filmmaker adjacent. But I remember when they got into Sundance, I was like, cool, I have no idea what that is. It sounds like a hippie dance festival somewhere in like the Rocky Mountains. I had no idea.
Come on. You didn't know like,
I had no idea what Sundance was. I mean, I guess I knew it was a festival, but like
you didn't know it from Burning Man.
No. And I remember even after we got into Sundance, I still didn't know what I was going to do. I certainly didn't know that there would be anything that would come of it. And I'd actually flown out to LA to go meet with my old boss from BMW Motorcycles in New York, who had started running the Riverside BMW dealership. Because I was like, yeah, maybe I'll just take a job in Riverside and like start, go get back to my passion for motorcycles, and who knows. So I flew all the way out there. I drove to Riverside, and I remember I got there and my boss looked at me and just said, like, what are you doing here? You don't want to be here. This is a huge mistake. Like, I'm not going to give you a job because I don't want you to end up doing this. And then, of course, we went to Sundance, and it was this hit. And I had a manager who wanted to try and make me a movie star, which ended up to obviously not be the right thing. But I met all these people, and I had an agent at CAA, and all this stuff happened.
We'll talk about that stuff, which was like you trying to figure it out, a team trying to figure it out, pull you in a place, and eventually you found your way. But those few years after the film, for you, it was rocky. It was unclear. Like, what was that process of? You kind of mentioned they wanted to try to make you a movie star. What did that look like, and how did those conversations happen? Were you like, yeah, I think I want this, and then no, I don't, or
I mean, basically, so right, I think before the movie was it? I guess it was right. Before Sundance, in the sort of pre-Sundance screening world that a lot of people I didn't know was a thing, but in Hollywood, obviously, the screeners go around and they have CAA or whatever. They have these screenings before the festivals and for buyers and whatever. And so this woman named Aline Kasheshian, who was a big manager in Hollywood, and I didn't even know at the time what does a manager do?
Sure.
Is that an agent? What's an agent? If there's a manager, you need a manager and an agent. Like, it's very confusing.
Yeah.
But this woman whose clients include the top A-listers from Jennifer Aniston to Brad Pitt to, just the top. She worked at this company called Brillstein, which is also this sort of very famous Hollywood institution. And she had seen the movie, and she said, Nev, you have this incredible energy and screen presence, and I think you should be a movie star, which is such a class.
I want to make you a star.
Right, like, literally, it was like that. And I, at the time, was like, okay, well, I'm not a good actor, so that's going to be tough. She's like, don't worry, we'll get you some acting classes.
Nobody cares about that,
and you'll be fine.
Yeah, nobody cares.
So I was like, okay. So she says, okay, you'll take some acting classes and we'll send you on some auditions. And this is where I realized that, like, I guess having the right person, in this case, a manager and an agent, means that you can just get any audition you want. Right. So I remember I went and met with, speaking of acting coaches, I went with some woman in Beverly Hills for 2 or 3 times to work on an audition.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember pretty well, it was for the role of the doorman in the Jim Carrey movie, Mr. Popper's Penguins.
Oh my God. How have I not heard this? Okay.
I can't believe you haven't heard this. Okay. So, and I didn't know at the time what that part was or I think that role ended up going to like a very, very famous like comedian character actor, right? Like it's a significant role. Like, and here I am, some 20s, like unknown, never acted before. I have no idea what I'm talking, like whatever. So I have this weird coaching session, which probably cost me a couple $100. And then the day of the audition comes around, and it's for the role of a doorman. So I never auditioned before. Okay. So I like to sort of, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it all the way. So at the time, because I was still doing press for Catfish, Universal had me staying at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills. And I had become really friendly with the concierge, this lady. And so I said to her the day before the audition, I said, hey, can I borrow one of your bellhop uniforms? I'm doing an audition for a doorman tomorrow. I should go in costume. I should go fully dressed. And she obliged and, set me up with an ill-fitting doorman uniform. And I go to this audition and I walk into the room. It's not glamorous at all. It's a little office. There's pictures of actors on the wall taped up. There's a camera on a tripod, 2 people sitting behind a table. And I do my terrible, terrible audition. Just terrible. Whatever. But it was so, so bad. And I leave, And even telling the story is like almost not, I almost get like sick in my stomach. I leave, I go into the restroom in the hallway to change out of my doorman outfit. And as I'm changing, I realize just how terrible that was. And I have this like feeling like, let me go back in there and and maybe like try again. So I knock on the door, I go back and I say, hey, that was really bad. Can I just try that one more time? And I'm sure, and God bless them, they let me. Not that it was any better.
Were they like, that was terrible. Go for it.
I don't remember. I think I blacked out, and I just like, but it was so humiliating and demoralizing. And I remember that a day later, my manager called me to like give me feedback, on how it went, which was obviously terrible. And I said, and I remember kind of yelling. I was like, yes, I know. I'm not a good actor. I have no acting experience. Like, this is crazy.
I've told you this already.
It was the most clear I'd ever been that like acting wasn't for me. And I said, what I really want to be doing is this Catfish TV show, which we had started talking about. It's like, well, let's just make that happen. And thankfully it happened.
Yeah.
And I was good at being me, not someone else.
Well, Catfish has gone on to be, I don't know, maybe MTV's most successful show ever. I don't know if that's accurate. You would probably know. But it's like you parlayed this documentary into the show. What, like in a real sort of hands dirty sort of outline, like what did that look like? Did you have an idea? Did you have to pitch? What was the process between like, I want to make this a show? A lot of people made that show happen, but you had the idea, you pushed it through. What did that look like?
Right. Well, you probably got the wrong guy on the podcast, to be honest. Because when it comes to like the hard work part, I'm not really the man. I mean, you were my roommate in college. Did you ever once see me doing work?
I saw you doing a lot of work, not for school, not for class.
Right.
You hustled with, and no, I mean, you kept your room impeccable. But I remember the first time you told me about the show, it might have even been at the premiere of Catfish, because you had the idea early on, and then it became a reality.
Right.
Unless you're telling me you just had the idea, right. MTV said sure, and it was no work, no effort.
No. First, that was not obviously what happened. But what happened was we had the idea based on the fact that the emails were flooding in about other people's crazy stories. And so we all collectively sat or just said like, hey, this should be a show. Obviously, I had no experience in that world. Rel and Henry had very, minimal experience, but none of us had done anything in television. But Mark and Andrew, again, because they had some experience and they had made a number of different projects and they'd worked with, studios and HBO and through CAA, and this is where, again, where having an agent is great, right? So we took the idea to their agents at CAA who work in the sort of packaging and pitching TV space, and they put it together and then set up pitch meetings for the guys. I wasn't even at the pitch meetings, I don't think. And they pitched it to a few different places. And I don't remember exactly who and how many of them were interested. I know that there was interest from a few different networks, but I think there were two most notably. One was MTV and one was something else. And the main reason that they chose to do MTV was because MTV essentially agreed to like let us make the show how we wanted to make it. Mm. And they also were okay with me hosting it. Mm. Because at the time, like, yes, the documentary had achieved some level of notoriety, but it was still pretty niche,
sure.
Small thing. And to like, to give some unknown kid a job hosting a show is like, that's a big risk, but that was obviously the one thing that was like, no, it has to be Nev. Mm. So yeah, so then they ended up making the deal to do a pilot with MTV. We made the pilot. It was a disaster, but like we ended up salvaging what ended up becoming the first episode of the show and really fighting over and establishing the format of the show. And that was where obviously where my real work started was being super committed to trying to make the show, my role in the show, the best it could be. Mm. And yeah, and then thankfully the pilot was good and they ordered a season, and then the rest is history.
there's a lot of reality television, and there's even now all these subgenres where shows are essentially scripted reality. And I remember a big part of that show was how real it was, how unscripted it was.
Right.
So talk about the actual show and what you and Max and the team did to really protect and preserve this format, and how different it was from maybe the rest of reality shows. I mean, even some of the things you said were like, who knows the truth of the episode going into it? How much do you and Max really not know? All of that sort of behind the scenes sort of stuff is really interesting for a show that's really different from all the other reality shows on TV.
Yeah, I mean, so the main priority going into the show was that Max and I wanted our experience to be authentic and to be learning about and discovering and experiencing the episode with the audience, not knowing anything, from where what the story is, where the story is taking us, where we're going to fly, nothing. And that has, with very, very few exceptions, remained a top priority for me. And now, of course, so I like to know where we're going, just in case, I know somebody who lives there, or if I have to plan my schedule or book tickets, because whatever. But I still sit down at the computer at every episode. I have no idea what the email is going to say, what the story is going to be. I know nothing. And when you see me reading that email for the first time, I am reading it for the first time. We don't do another take. We don't reshoot. It's rolling and we go. In fact, the only time once in a while, they'll ask me to reread an email because I'll have been too goofy or too weird or said something too, sometimes I say, "Hey, Neve, that was great, but we may not be able to use that. Can you just read it again?" Right. One time we got an email from some guy who lived in Texas, and I just, for some reason, decided to read the whole email with a Southern accent. and they were like, "That was great, but I don't know if we're going to want to use that." Anyway, so that's been really important. And then I remember in the pilot, when we were shooting, they had us walking up to this house where this catfish was apparently going to be waiting for us. And I knew that they had obviously already been to the house to obviously, know where they were going to be standing and try to, plan out what could happen. But there was no Neve, do this or don't do that. It was just go, knock, see what happens. But they had wanted to put a cameraman inside the house to get the reverse of the door opening. And I said, no, that's crazy. That's not real life. If there's already a camera guy in there, then it's obvious that you're already there. That doesn't work. And I really pushed back on that.
It was a good instinct.
Yeah. And, and you see it all the time in reality shows where the door opens from the inside, and it's fine because you sort of understand that show is not supposed to be happening in real time. You're watching a whatever. But
I feel like not everybody does realize that. And it's one of those things that, I feel incredulous about. And I don't know, I find that people, they don't really think about that they don't realize that how scripted these things really are, usually.
Right. Yeah. And so look, obviously there's no secret that in order to make the show, there has to be some contact with both people. They have to know and understand that they're putting themselves out there. There's obviously no concept of what will happen, who will say what, sometimes when it'll happen.
There's one producer at MTV is the person that reaches out and knows how many.
Yeah. So yeah, well, I don't know how many. I mean, essentially the stories come in, they're real. Mm-hmm. No one's making these stories up, despite what some people think. These are real people with real stories, unless those people make up the stories, which does sometimes happen. Yeah. But we don't make up anything. In fact, we're constantly struggling to find real good stories that we can use. The stories come in, our casting team reaches out, makes sure that the people are legit, just does basic fact checking to make sure that they're not just bogus clout chasers who are trying to get on TV with a fake story. There's a handful of people who know the basics of okay, this is the person here and this is the person here. Nobody on the crew knows the story. Obviously, Cami and I don't know. Max and I didn't know. And no one knows what's going to happen or what they're going to say. And that shit changes all the time. I'm constantly looking over at our producer when we're finding things on the internet or when I'm calling people, kind of cold calling. And I get to make my own decisions. When we're filming, I'll say like, ooh, let's reach out to that person. I don't know who that person is or what they're going to say or if they're going to like, and sometimes they'll say something and the producers, there's one producer who's like sort of sitting off to the side who will look up and be like, I don't know what's happening. Like, who is that? Is this like, so there is a lot of real, life that comes into the show.
And well, it's also an innovation of early on having Max, who's a great, brilliant filmmaker himself, actually holding a camera. And I don't think people realize how much of the footage that ended up, at least in Max's seasons, was stuff Max actually shot.
That was honestly, that was probably like our biggest running joke for the first 6 or 7 seasons was that Max, no one thought Max's camera was actually doing anything.
Because it's a little looks like a point and shoot.
Well, for a while it was actually a full size camera, but yeah, and then obviously that when the SNL skit happened and they had whoever that was, like holding it upside down and like pointing it the wrong way, that obviously didn't help his cause.
They just were projecting this myth that it was just a prop.
Right, but it wasn't. In fact, I think, and this was, again, credit to Rel and Henry for the way they filmed the doc and pushing to have Max filming those shots. Because when we watched the show, we always knew which shots were Max's. I think those shots were actually the best and were used the most because it's so unusual that you have a camera like just off from the person or oftentimes right below the person who's talking and like have them looking right. It just was a really interesting, intimate angle that you don't often get. We pushed really hard and eventually lost on inserting more B-roll of the people's lives. We really wanted to show who these people were rather than tell who they were. And so Max and I was always getting shots of like knickknacks, and we would open their fridge and show what kind of food they had. And we wanted to follow them to work because some of these people like had jobs at 4 a.m. stocking groceries, and we were like, let's go with them to the grocery store. And obviously, again, we were new to the television world, and we didn't really know about releases, and you can't get supermarkets to give you permission to film, and like all the stuff that we just didn't realize you can't just do when you're actually filming a real show for a real network. Because we're all used to just like making little indie films where you can just do whatever you want.
How many more seasons are you guys at least planning?
I mean, we are 42 episodes into an order of 100.
Wow.
So
a reorder.
So that's another at least 2 seasons, depending on how they break it up.
How many episodes have aired thus far?
Yeah, that's a good question. We could do the math, but over about almost 200 probably now.
That's insane. Something Justin and I talk a lot about. Just with
that you and Justin talk about, because I didn't even know he could talk.
Well, Thomas, I only get 3 minutes per podcast, and so I have a chess timer that I have to use. So I should probably let me click it now so I can save some time.
Well, yeah, can't make sure you're counting that because you did
We're
also
like
say
Penn
something
Teller.
A few minutes ago.
If Penn and Teller
that was what I was thinking.
had a podcast.
Yeah, well, let me ask Justin about what type of scientist are you?
I mean, my background is in neuroscience. I actually worked for Henry Jarecki in New York years ago. Yeah, that's kind of a weird connection, right? And
that's crazy.
I met Eugene at a company Christmas party because he worked for Falconwood, I think, at the time. But he had just made. I loved film, but I was like very much a scientist. But I had just seen his documentary, "Why We Fight," I think is what it was called. Like post Bush era. And I remember meeting him and like chatting him up for 10 minutes before I was like 23 or something. But yeah, so I was a neuroscientist, worked for Jarecki's company up there, and then kind of pivoted more into biotech out of sort of hardcore early research. And now I do like analytical spectroscopy kind of science. So chemistry, physics, neuroscience, those are kind of my wheelhouses that I like to play in.
Cool. Andrew was just telling me about his dad who just finished finally writing a book he's been working on for like 30 years.
Really? He's got an interesting life.
Yeah.
Is it about his life or is it fiction?
It's about his life. How to succeed, essentially. according to Henry Jarecki.
First, be born in Nazi Germany, survive.
Yeah, right.
Earn a lot of grit from that.
Sell your company and put all the money into gold and put it on a boat and ship it to America.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely an eccentric guy. He gave me a gold coin as like a bonus one year.
Wow.
For, because I helped them design some image recognition algorithms, and so he gave me a gold coin. He was like, "Yeah, they can't tax this." I was like, "Okay."
How much gold is it?
It was an ounce. I mean, and this was, but it's an ounce of gold. Back then, I think an ounce of gold was like $300. So, he was like it was just funny because it's like this.
How much is it? Do you still have it?
Yeah, I think it's worth like $1,800 or something like that. It's just
Cool.
like sitting in my safe. But actually, Thomas, so, Nev, I actually have written a book and I'm like working on the second draft. And Thomas, you've read it. The character Tusk, the one that I'm like, he's in there for this very small reason. He's like this billionaire industrialist. He's basically there because I need somebody who is like overseeing this renovation project. He's based on Jarecki.
Yeah, Thomas didn't read your book, dude.
No, I know.
He definitely didn't read it.
The notes were so weird. He was like, making references to friends and all kinds of stuff.
I gave him 20 pages of notes, bruh. It's a novel. It's an amazing science-based ghost story novel. Stay with us as we continue our discussion with Nev.
This is the part where we get raw and transparent with our favorite topic.
Identity crises.
And parenting failures.
Ooh, and how social media is ruining all of our self-perception.
Ooh, that's my personal favorite. Stay with us.
Stay with us.
Stay with us.
Stay
with us. Stay with us.
But Justin and I talk a lot about identity, and we're guys who we quit our jobs to start Bad Theology. We had some success. We had some failures.
Lots of failures.
Part of what we started the podcast is just sort of recounting the journey as we're sort of finding ourselves again. So identity has been a recurring theme. And I'm curious, how has your identity been shaped or been in crisis or been reformed in these last 10 years? Like, what have you learned about yourself? What are you still learning? And what do you hope, for the next 5 to 10 years?
There are very clear dividing lines in my life timeline, where I've actually changed or felt change versus sort of where the perception of me has changed. Some of those coincide. I would say the weirdest thing that happened as a result of becoming a sort of public figure, as a result of the documentary, and then obviously more so of the show, when the documentary came out, the world was introduced to me as this guy who was a photographer and, like a real romantic and a super, super sweet, non-judgmental, compassionate person and very likable, right? Now, those are not things that at that time I would have considered myself to be. No one would have described me that way, with the exception of like maybe my mom. And it would have been with like, I know he's kind of a pain in the ass, but trust me, he's actually a great guy. Like that would have been probably the best, the most complimentary description of me you could get. And so for me to all of a sudden be kind of presented as this stand-up, just great guy was strange, because on one hand, it was unbelievable, right? All of a sudden now I get to sort of just step into this projection, this character, which is based on real parts of who I am, but like definitely not a way I'd ever really been perceived before. And so in a weird way, I kind of had to convince myself that I could be the person everyone already thought I was. And I'm still sort of grappling with that, because there's a version of me that the world has seen and likes, and that's what they want. And though I can and have modified and slightly reinvented aspects of it, I'm constantly finding myself frustrated that like, I kind of just wish I could be this, or man, I wish I could just be my actual self and say the things I really want to say. But that's not what people want to hear, you know, and nothing's a reminder of that more than when, as the guy from Catfish, you try to do something else, whether it's write a book or sell a t-shirt or promote and people just do not fucking care. They like you because of the thing that you do that they like, and for everything else, they've got someone else that they like. Like you fit the thing that they want. Just stay in your lane, right? Which is unfortunately the term that gets used a lot by those people. Anyway, so it's been incredible. It's been fantastic, but it's also weirdly been a little constricting, and you know, I'm constantly retying and mending the constraints that being both famous but also sort of the character that I am on TV, which is partly me, but like keeping myself sort of tied up and keeping that corset cinched so that I present and maintain and please the masses.
Was that a big reason you wanted to do Dancing with the Stars, is to break away?
I mean, that was definitely a bonus. I mean, I just wanted to do Dancing with the Stars because I love to dance.
Yeah, it wasn't
and
calculated.
Anybody who knows me, right? Anybody who knows me personally knows that I love dance. But I've made some dance videos in the past, and I've posted dance stuff on my social media, and no one cares. Like, that's just not. They're if you want to follow a dancer, there's way better dancers. So it's like, you know, I didn't feel like there was a tremendous amount of care or support for my passion for dance outside of my friends and family, until Dancing with the Stars. And then it was like, oh, cool. There is an audience of people who love dance, who do support me and my passion for dance. And that felt great. And it might, you know, lead to other opportunities. Well, whatever. You know, like people who had not been aware of me are now aware of me, and they're aware of me as the dance guy, not the Catfish guy. Yeah. And that feels so nice, just to have a new thing, so that I'm not just the guy that you roll your window down while you're driving by and say Catfish, you know, because like that's what I usually get. So yeah, so in terms of identity, and then, you know, obviously I think the more recent and larger milestone in my identity is like having kids, right? Because nothing makes you more aware of exactly who you are than when you fail to become the person you always hoped you would be as a parent.
Oh man, I'm feeling that today. This week.
So all of a sudden I have these right. So now I've got these kids, and I know the version of a dad that I'd like to be, but like, that's not me.
Yep.
I'm just not that guy. You know what I mean? So, and you know, and kid, you know, obviously kids can be so unbelievably poignant and painfully articulate when it comes to letting you know exactly who you are. The other day, after a week, after spring break week, and we took the kids to California. And then we came back, and obviously we'd flown back on Saturday, and then here we are, it's Sunday afternoon. Laura and I are exhausted. We've had the kids all of 8-9 days straight, traveling, whatever. And we just want them to like relax and get ready for bed. And the house is a mess, blah, blah, blah. And Cleo, my 4.5-year-old, just looks at me and she says, Dad, how come you never smile? It's like, oh my God. I am a miserable, terrible, unhappy person.
Well, that's when you have to lock the eyes of the kid and say, when you do something to make me smile, you'll see me smile.
Right. Yeah. How come you don't make me smile? Right. Yeah. So, you know, so that's something that I'm now grappling with, is like, how do I accept who I actually am versus and let go of this expectation and projection I've carried along, you know, around in my psyche as a result of television and movies and it's fucking internet and seeing all these perfect parents with how they making fucking lunchboxes every goddamn day and all the cute DIY projects, and this is like I should do all of that stuff. How if I'm not doing all that stuff, I must not care about my kids. I must be a bad dad. But like, I'm not gonna do that stuff, and I don't want to feel bad about it all the time
or judge yourself based on fucking Instagram.
Right,
which
is
so
one.
Tough.
It's just don't be on social media. Or have I'm
closer
presence.
and closer to getting off social media, as a matter of fact. But you know what's? It's so nice being a sort of famous person on social media, because like you can get shit, like, and I don't mean free shit, because I don't want any of that. I just mean like a reservation at a restaurant. Like I can DM someone and like
you could probably still do that by being off social.
Yeah, but like the other day, we're going up to the Catskills this weekend, and I found this cool thing, an activity where you take your kids on like a little pedal railroad car, and you go for like a 2-hour tour through the fuck. It looks so cool, and I went to book it and booked. So I just DM'd the account. I was like, hey, really hoping to come this weekend, Saturday afternoon, anything you can do. He's like, oh, no problem, we'll get you right in. Like,
you're like, hi, I'm an influencer, you don't mind if I sneak in here, do you?
Right. And then he even said like, we're happy to comp you, it's $200. I was like, he said, we'll comp you if you put it on your story. And I was like, look, man, I'll probably put it on my story, but I don't want to feel pressure to do it, so I'm going to pay you.
Yeah.
It's like, I hate that. Nothing makes me want to do it less than knowing I have to.
Ooh. Transaction of, well, that's, the whole social media, which I don't even begin to understand or even know what to do with or what it'll look like in 5 years.
You know what blows my mind? And now obviously this is just becoming a parenting podcast, but like...
That's really what it is.
Have you guys noticed that do your kids care about... Do you have kids, Justin?
Yeah, I've got 2.
Okay.
6 and 9.
Do they care about your phone? Because like, I would have assumed my kids would be obsessed with our phones, but I think because they see us on them so often... They almost don't care. In fact, my son constantly tells me to put my phone away.
My boys are always grabbing it because that's the only... Well, they have like a Kindle, but they're really into like filming their own stuff and editing an iMovie, and so...
Get him a camera.
No, we just did for his birthday,
okay.
and so he's got his own camera, which is great, and now he can edit it. And
right.
But yeah, no, I definitely hear from them, the youngest, like, get off your phone. Talk to me, look at me, which you're just like, oh, God.
That's another moment where you're just like, I'm the worst. Yeah.
Yeah, my kids, they only really are interested when they see a text come in and they want to read it because they're like CIA. They're always like looking over his shoulder. And once they figured out that you could take pictures and film without unlocking the phone. And so we will, like, my wife has an iPhone and she'll like, why is my memory completely full? And they're like, I have 2 hours of like my kids fighting with each other that they've snuck in over the last 2 weeks. It's, which is hilarious. But yeah, I mean, we try to like just, my wife is on call a lot of the time, but other than that, we try to keep our phones like out of sight.
Right.
It helps not having something to doom scroll on.
It's tough, but I think your acceptance, cutting yourself slack, accepting who you are, that is, you're articulating what I am, even going through myself, of just like accepting who I am and obviously trying to be the best version of myself, but not trying to be someone I'm not. So it's
right.
It's probably an ongoing thing. I mean, we were just last episode talking about, people in their 70s and 80s still, finding themselves.
Trying to figure it out.
Well, anyway, so what I've become more kind of sure about and confident about is like, and right now I'm going through a major, I'll say major, but like, I love cars, right? I love, not because like I'm an engineer or I like to go fast. I like having something that I can drive. I just like them. I like that I can be a part of a machine and that it feels like it just, that sort of sense of independence and control. And I'm a good driver, so I enjoy driving.
Yeah.
Right. Because the entire world becomes a video game and I get to see how well I can do. Right. And I know that about myself. I love it. I fucking love it. Right. And so I like weird sort of obscure cars from the 80s and 90s. I now have 4 old cars. Okay, 2 in New York and 2 in LA.
Did you get that limo?
And I haven't, no, but it's still on my radar. I should have bought it. I absolutely should have bought it. But here's the problem, right? I now have kids. I have a wife. Not super safe to take the kids in the car, and my wife doesn't want to drive old cars. And I don't blame her. Should I get rid of them? Is it time? And I'm having a really hard time because it's something that I like.
Mm.
And even though it's like, can be a headache and there's always something that needs to get fixed, and I love it. I love driving to the mechanic. I love chatting with weird people who I meet along the way. Like, it's a thing that I like. And so striking a balance between understanding that it's something that I need and want and that makes me happy, but it's also could be interfering with time spent doing other things and like not feeling guilt about it, but also feeling guilty about it. Like, it's tricky. And so so I've sort of said to myself, like, I'm just going to sell them all. I'm just going to fucking sell them and I'm going to lease a new cool car and I'll be that guy with the fucking car that every other asshole has. But like, at least it won't be a headache and my wife won't be annoyed and she'll be comfortable driving it. And like, I've got kids and I can take my kids in that car and that'll be better than not being able to, like, but it's tough because it's definitely like sort of letting go of a thing that I love or a part of my life.
I think that's like a risky proposition because this is something that I see. I look at people who they've had kids and they just like, they give it all up. And I will say I see a lot more when I look at like women and their careers, right? They have kids and there's a social expectation, put your career on hold, just like pour everything into your kids. But then your kids grow up and they're independent people and you've left behind all these parts of yourself. And then your kids, they love you, but hopefully, but they're at school, they're doing their own thing, and you've forgotten about all these things that you love. And so I love riding my motorcycle. I love fixing my motorcycle, playing with my motorcycle. And, that's something I sold my first motorcycle right after my daughter was born, but not because of safety, but because I didn't have any money and I needed the money from the motorcycle because we had one car. And I was like, all right, I have to sell this and get a car. And because you can't, unfortunately, in North Carolina, you can't put a car seat on a motorcycle. What I will say is that then later, I ended up getting it back. I talked to my wife and I was like, I know this wasn't really but a safety thing, but let's talk about statistics. She was like, I don't care.
Wait, did you got back the same motorcycle?
No, I got back a much nicer grown-up motorcycle.
Okay.
No, that would be wild. But I don't think I would ever ride that old thing again. But anyway, the point is like, I don't consider myself like, I'm Justin, the motorcycle rider.
Right.
Nobody really knows that about me, but it's just something I love. Like if I'm having a hard time at work or I can't focus on something I'm writing, I'm like, I'm going to go ride to the gas station, but I'm going to go the long way, which is going to take me, 45 minutes. And I think, if I give these things up that are personal to me, and I do love my kids, they're like honestly my best friends. And I know that's somewhat, problematic, but, I want to have things like as they continue to grow up and become teenagers and they want to spend less time with me, I don't want to give up everything about myself. And I feel like the same thing, with you in your old cars, like, or whatever it is.
If you have four, maybe you sell two.
I know. Well, that's right.
If you've got 4 kids, just get rid of 2 of them.
That's true.
Well, I did have one other question. You were talking about, wanting to sort of break out of the mold that you feel like has sort of coalesced around you. And you talked about dancing. I'm curious because you also threw a couple other things out there, like write a book. Are these things other things that you actually have a desire to do or to be in ways that you feel constrained from? Are there things that you have in mind?
The biggest obstacle for me and probably most people to doing any other thing or redefining oneself, or for me, starting a new career path is just hard work. It's just really hard, and even as a successful person now who has established myself as a talent in the TV space, like, doesn't make it any easier to get another TV show made. I have been trying for so long now, pitching, partnering, developing. It's hard. It's really hard. And I've put in some work. I've developed the ideas. I've gone on the pitch meetings. It's just hard. And so part of me is like, I'm never going to have another hit show like Catfish. Do I want to start scrambling to like get other gigs and then like end up on some dumb reality show like The Hills and stuff? Like, no, I don't want to do that. So I've got to do something else. But starting over. It's like, ugh, that's hard too. Or so what else would it be? And tough. But like I am leaning into my passion for dance. I've sort of saddled up to these ladies who have this incredible outdoor dance performance series that they've been doing that we're going to try and take on the road this summer. And I'm also hosting the annual Dance Against Cancer fundraiser gala this June. In fact, Thomas, if you and Amanda want to come up for that,
Oh, cool.
Let me know.
In New York?
It's in New York, and I'm actually going to be dancing for the first year with a super famous ballet dancer from New York City Ballet. We're going to, I think, be opening the show.
Oh, wow.
The crazy thing is, no matter what you do and how successful you are, you never know. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow or what you're going to be doing in 5 years. Thomas, you said, what do you want? Like, what's your next 5 years look like? I know I've got 2 more years of making Catfish, assuming MTV doesn't go bankrupt. And then after that, I have no idea. I don't know if I'm going to live in New York, LA, if we're going to have to sell our places and move to Charlotte. I don't know. Maybe we will. Maybe Justin and I can start a motorcycle repair shop. I've always wanted to do that.
Let's do it.
Carolinas are beautiful.
They sure are.
Easy to live. You could sell your house
Blue Ridge
in
Mountains.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you flew down to buy a motorcycle and then drove it back to New York.
Anyway, Justin, what kind of motorcycle do you have now?
I have a Triumph Thruxton.
Thruxton, nice.
Yeah. Quite a bit of fun. Quite a bit of fun.
My dad gave me his Suzuki GS 850, which was so heavy, and I dropped it one time at a stoplight, picked it up, and I never felt comfortable. I took motorcycle lessons. I wanted to be a motorcyclist so bad, like my dad, like my friends, like you guys, and I just never could quite do it. So it
wasn't for you.
Traded it away. All right, coming up, 2 picks, 3 friends, still no shits.
It's 3 picks though this week, isn't it? Isn't
yes, when we have a guest, we do 3 picks, but
3 picks.
The segment's called 2 picks.
So then one of us should have to skip.
Branding, look it up.
It says burning animals. Burning, is that what we're doing?
Well, cool, man. Good chatting. We like to finish off the episode with just sort of some recommendations.
Oh, yeah. I've got a good one for you.
Cool. Go for it.
For Mother's Day, I bought Laura, my wife, a vintage or antique, I don't know what the right word is, gold engagement ring. Just like a really cute little gold band with a one set little diamond. I mean, it's very, very quaint. I gave it to her. It was a little big. It was too big. So we got it resized. So one of my recommendation is getting things resized is actually pretty easy and inexpensive. After they resized the ring, they cleaned it. When I bought it, I was like, oh, it's so cute. It looks sort of so old and antique-y. And then it got cleaned. It's unbelievably shiny and sparkly, right? Which is, depending on your style, good or bad, but like shockingly rejuvenated. So any ladies listening or gentlemen who want to do something sweet for your lady, take their jewels to get them cleaned. It's like new jewelry.
Yeah.
That's good.
I know that seems like a weird suggestion, but I think we should all take better care of our things, and jewelry is one thing you probably never think about. Like, oh, it still looks nice, but then you get it re-fucking clean and it's like a new thing.
Yeah. I did that recently for my wife because I was looking at her ring. She left it in the bowl next to the sink, and I was like, this looks like a fake like jewel,
right.
Like it looks like and it's white gold. I was like, because you put lotion on your hands, right, and it gets under the stone and all that.
Sure.
So I had it cleaned, and I didn't tell her about it. And she's like, "Oh my God, this is so sparkly now." I'm like, "Yeah, it looked kind of like a fake, everything before that. It looked like costume jewelry."
It's the cheapest jewelry you'll ever buy.
Yeah, is spending the money.
It's just the same one you already bought, but just cleaning it.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation. I've got a good one. I think, Thomas, as a family, you should all watch a Netflix movie that just came out called The Mitchells versus the Machines. It is it is silly, and I was like one of those ones that it popped up, and I was like, all right, I'll come back to this.
It's animated, so Justin saw it.
Yeah, I have a well-curated...
That's all he watches.
all of the animated films. No, but it is like really good. And as a parent, it's one of those ones I really tried my hardest not to cry during it and like let my kids see me cry. But, whatever. It's going to happen. So it's just, it is really goofy and silly and such a weird premise, but it ends up being really like fun and actually a good sort of like inspection of what families look like and go through. So it was good.
Someone gifted us a little pizza movie night just because of a raffle, and so I was like, well, we could just stream whatever, but let's rent something that we can't stream. So we rented Edward Scissorhands. If you've seen like the Super Bowl, Timothy Chalamet plays Edward Scissorhands' son. So my kids have seen this character and they're like, who is that? And I was like, oh, that's based on Edward Scissorhands, this movie. So we talked it up and it really holds up. It is a great movie. There's nothing quite like it before it and nothing quite like it since. And my boys are really into it. They're a little freaked out because, Johnny Depp's...
You can't recommend Edward Scissorhands, Thomas.
I'm not. I was just...
He's trying to take a dump on my recommendation.
No, I'm
He's like,
saying...
here's a good film that you could have recommended.
I'm going to recommend Pickup Trucks. Talking about cars and bikes, motorcycles. I'm just like, I got my first one 2 years ago.
What?
And I only got it because I went in there for an SUV. I was trading in my sedan for an SUV, a Toyota, and I was looking
Tacoma.
And they were having this amazing deals on Tacomas. So I got a Toyota Tacoma and I have loved it. What's that?
Crew cab?
The full four-door.
Yeah. That's what I want to get.
All my friends are like, dude, that's my dream car. And I was like, really? So many people have told me that's the car they want to get.
I had one. I had one with the half back, like
the sideways seats,
whatever, extra cab.
Yeah,
sideways seats. Disaster. Just
those
get
are
the
great.
full one.
I spent a lot of time sitting in those in high school.
And I got the full one just so it could be an additional family car. But, like going to Lowe's and doing this backyard fire pit project, which, we concluded was productivity addiction last week. I just throwing stuff in the back and I love it. So pickup trucks.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't get it when you're too young, though, or you will move every person that you know.
True.
Right, that's true.
You got to be in your 30s before you get it.
After all your friends have sort of settled.
Or realize that they can pay for movers. I am curious before we go. What can you tell us? What kind of vintage cars you have? I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. So I've got. Speaking of pickup trucks, I've got two. I've got a 1989 Shelby Dakota,
like the Shelby of the Cobra.
Carroll Shelby.
Oh my gosh!
Custom built 1500 Dodge Dakotas in 1989.
Oh my gosh!
So you can look that up. That's a cute car. I've got a 1988 BMW 635 Coupe, the sort of the often called the Shark car. And then I've also got a 1988 Ford Ranger, which is a great little pickup truck with the STX Highboy factory lift package, and a 1992 Jeep Cherokee.
Nice. First car that I ever owned, first car that I ever rolled over was a Jeep. I think it was actually a 1984 Jeep Grand Wagoneer. I rolled that bad boy all the way over back onto the wheels.
Nice.
My dad is a huge GT40 fan, Carroll Shelby and all that whole racing empire. My dad is not in a place in his life where he will probably ever be able to own a GT40, but we did buy an old Pantera. Do you know that?
Cool.
Are you familiar with the Pantera?
Yeah,
the
of course.
Italian body, but it's got a Ford 351 Windsor in it. And so we bought that and rebuilt it. It was plagued with cooling problems, the car itself. And anyway, we got it up and running, and it was, a lot of fun to do that. And then Jay Leno bought one, and the prices like shot through the roof. So we're like, all right, I think it's time to cash out of this car.
Nice.
Because it was like, I don't know what it was on.
So
but
it was an appreciable asset.
Well, it was not meant to be. It was because, it's such a weird random car. Like nobody knows what it is. It kind of looks like a weird old, maybe like Lamborghini, but then,
it does a little bit.
But it, obviously it's not as well made as a Lamborghini. But then Jay Leno bought one. All of a sudden everybody knew what it was and they wanted to buy it. So it was also the most gross orange that my dad loves, but to each his or her own.
Thank you for listening, everyone, and thank you again to Nev for giving us his time, his heart, his money, his pants, his children.
His passwords?
And thanks again to Luxury for blessing us with your amazing music this episode. You can find Luxury on the internet the way you'd find anything on the internet.
Blessing us feels like they're like doing a benediction on like sprinkling us with their music. I know, but it's still weird.
I'm going to retroactively have them bless this episode.
And they're going to sprinkle us with holy music juice.
Please help us grow our audience, because it's really about us, by subscribing to this podcast wherever you listen to yours, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere else. Rate us, review us, tell your friends about us. You want to read a couple reviews?
Yeah, how do I find this?
There's a brand new review from DSNE1. Podcast name, the only nameless podcast to have such high-quality content. The running joke is great. Hey, who said this was a running joke? We really are trying to find a podcast name. I love the intentionality behind the interesting and varied discussion topics, but these two friends also do so well with spontaneity. It's a great sounding podcast with material of depth and also just really fun. Keep up the good work, two friends. I know that sounds paid. I promise. We did not pay this person. DSNE1.
Not very much. Nicholas Paul writes, I love this podcast. Thomas and Justin talk about their process of leaving great jobs and leaping into film. And it's not pretty. I find it incredibly relatable in my walk through life. Also, love their takes on Soul, new Pixar movie, and It's a Wonderful Life. Can't wait for more.
So that must have been after our very first episode, because that's where we talked about all that.
If you want to stay connected to us throughout the month, you can follow our Instagram account at twofriendspod.
And get in touch with us at twofriendswithapodcast.com, which will have all the footnotes for this episode and any links to resources that we might have discussed. We also have our email address, hey@twofriendswithapodcast.com. So reach out to us.
Thomas, people want to see your film work. Where in the world wide web can they go?
They can go to thomastorrey.com. And Justin, if people want to see what our company, Bad Theology, is up to, where can they go?
badtheologypictures.com, or follow us on Instagram at Bad Theology, or listen to this podcast and we'll give you updates.
We drop episodes every other week, so keep up with us.
Thanks for listening.
We love you.
We love you.
Isn't it somewhat counterintuitive if you're a hustler trying to make it to stop what you're doing for an hour and listen to a couple of clowns talk about?
True. Although there's a point where, especially when you've reached success, that you stop talking about it. And for people who haven't reached that success, everything kind of lives behind this wall of institutional knowledge that nobody gets privy to. So like actually stopping and talking about, hey, how we got from A, B to C, right, I think is a service. So suck it.